Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm your host GL, and today I'd like to talk about centrifugation. Centrifugation is a mechanical process that uses spinning force to separate components of a mixture, while sedimentation is the natural settling of particles under gravity. The main difference is speed. Centrifugation can separate mixtures in minutes, while sedimentation might take hours or days. You know, I love explaining this to my students using pizza dough as an example. When you're making pizza and there's water mixed with flour, if you just let it sit there, that's sedimentation. The flour will eventually sink to the bottom, but it'll take forever. Now imagine putting that mixture in a salad spinner. That's essentially what centrifugation does. The spinning creates a force much stronger than gravity, pushing the heavier stuff outward much faster. It's like taking gravity and cranking it up to 11. Centrifugal force is created when an object moves in a circular path, pushing everything outward from the center of rotation. In a centrifuge, this force can be thousands of times stronger than gravity, causing particles to separate based on their mass and density. Let me paint you a picture that my students love. Imagine you're on a carnival ride, one of those spinning UFO rides where you're stuck to the wall. That's centrifugal force in action. Your heavier friend gets pushed harder against the wall than your lighter friend. The same thing happens in a centrifuge tube. Heavier particles experience a stronger push and move outward faster. And here's a fun fact, when we spin samples at 10,000 RPM, the force can be so strong it's like stacking 10,000 elephants on top of your sample. Pretty wild, right? Centrifugation can separate any mixture where components have different densities, including blood into plasma and cells, milk into cream and skim milk, and muddy water into clear water and sediment. It's particularly effective with liquid-liquid and liquid-solid mixtures. Hey, you know what? This reminds me of my infamous kitchen experiment. I once tried to separate a vinaigrette dressing using our school's centrifuge, purely for educational purposes, of course. The oil and vinegar separated beautifully, but let's just say the lab smelled like an Italian restaurant for a week. But it makes for a great demonstration, just like how oil and vinegar separate naturally in your salad dressing, but way faster. We also use it to separate things like plant cells, bacteria cultures, and even DNA samples. It's like having a superpowered strainer that works on a microscopic level. Density is absolutely crucial in centrifugation because it determines the final position of each component after spinning. Denser materials experience a stronger centrifugal force and move further from the center, while less dense materials stay closer to the center or float to the top. Think of it like a high school dance, but with molecules. The heavier kids, let's call them the football players, push their way to the outside of the dance floor, while the lighter kids, maybe the chess club members, stay closer to the center. Not the most politically correct analogy, but my students never forget it. Another way to visualize it is like a smoothie being separated. The ice chips and frozen fruit chunks are denser, so they get pushed to the bottom, while the lighter foam rises to the top. The beauty of centrifugation is that it creates distinct layers based on density, kind of like a density rainbow in a test tube. In medicine, centrifugation is vital for blood analysis, separating blood into plasma, white blood cells, and red blood cells. It's also used to concentrate samples for diagnostic tests, separate urine components, and isolate DNA for genetic testing. You know what I tell my students? Blood separation is like the ultimate layered smoothie. When we centrifuge blood, it creates distinct layers. The plasma floats on top like coconut water. The white blood cells form a thin whitish layer in the middle called the buffy coat, like a tiny whipped cream layer, and the red blood cells sink to the bottom like strawberry puree. And here's a cool fact, when doctors need to study just one component, like plasma for clotting tests, they don't have to go fishing around with a turkey baster like I do when making gravy. The centrifuge does all the work for them. And by the way, if you are enjoying the video so far, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button. It really helps support the channel. And it only takes a second. The speed of centrifugation, measured in RPM or relative centrifugal force, directly affects both the separation time and the effectiveness of separation. Higher speeds create stronger forces, leading to faster and more complete separation of components. Let me explain this with something my students love: race cars. Think of a centrifuge like a NASCAR race. When cars go faster around the track, they experience stronger forces pushing them toward the outside wall. Same thing happens in our centrifuge tubes. At 1000 RPM, it's like driving on a regular highway, things separate slowly. But crank it up to 10,000 RPM, and now we're in Formula 1 territory. The particles are experiencing forces so strong, they practically screaming "get out of my way," as they zoom to their respective positions. Just don't tell the principal I'm making race car noises during lab demonstrations. The key safety rules are: always balance the tubes properly, never open the lid while spinning, check for tube cracks before use, and never exceed the maximum speed rating. Also, keep detailed records of maintenance and any issues encountered. This one's serious business, folks, and I learned it the hard way. Picture this: my first year teaching, I didn't balance the tubes properly, and the centrifuge started doing the cha-cha across the lab bench. It sounded like a washing machine full of rocks. Since then, I always tell my students, treat the centrifuge like you're packing for a perfectly balanced vacation suitcase. If you put something on one side, you better have its twin on the opposite side. And for heaven's sake, don't try to peek inside while it's running. It's not like checking if your cookies are done in the oven. Trust me, nobody wants to explain to the principal why this mysterious scoop on the ceiling. Modern centrifuges now feature digital controls, automatic balancing systems, and advanced safety features. We also have ultracentrifuges that can spin at incredibly high speeds, up to 150,000 RPM, allowing for separation of much smaller particles like proteins and viruses. When I started teaching, our centrifuge was practically steam-powered. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but compared to today's machines, it was like a rusty bicycle next to a Tesla. These new ones are like something out of a sci-fi movie. They've got touchscreens, refrigeration systems, and some can even send data to your phone. I joke with my students that they're so smart, they probably do their own taxes. But seriously, these advances have revolutionized research. We can now separate things so tiny that if you lined up 100 of them, they'd still be smaller than the period at the end of this sentence. Pretty mind-blowing, right? If you're looking for exercises to test your knowledge, there is a link in the description for you. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the video so far and want to see more content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.